Welcome everybody to the new episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, a bi-weekly podcast focusing on all things Microsoft Cloud and related to technology. This week, we are going to be discussing various topics. David is going to be talking about God mode within Entra. Sort of related to that, in a way, Cyrus is going to be talking about some new Intune features for Macs that have been sort of announced by Microsoft. And I'm going to be covering two breaches that happened relatively recently. Astute watchers and listeners will remember that we actually, I was on annual leave for 2 weeks, so we actually recorded the previous episode 2 and a bit weeks ago. This one we're recording a week in advance. So this is going to be an interesting scenario for this week's. And of course, because we recorded the previous episode in advance, we all missed the deep seek kerfuffle that happened and the resulting sort of scrambling around from various organizations and governments, etc., about whether they were allowed to use it and how it impacted them and the future of AI, etc., etc. Weirdly, I don't think, apart from that diatribe, I don't think we're actually going to be talking anything about that, apart from Vessel Jekyll from Microsoft has actually released a blog post this morning talking about how to protect your organization against misuse of DeepSeek, which is, as you would expect, it's purview, data security, cloud security posture management, Defender for Cloud, etc., etc. I'll put a link into the article. I haven't had a chance to read it yet because literally I've just switched the laptop on and joined this. But it's interesting that they've come up with something. Anyway, enough waffle.
But importantly, Richard, is it kerfuffle or kerfuffle? I always thought it was kerfuffle.
It depends on how tired I am. As the usual diversion that we have on this podcast, getting the Uber back from Heathrow on Wednesday, lovely Uber driver asked me what the difference is between via and via, and I was like, do you know what? I don't know. I don't even know what the sort of recommended pronunciation of that is. So there you go. The joys of the English language.
Yeah. And a complete digression, but there is a chap on TikTok that at the moment is doing Welsh translations of English animals, and also he started doing some English idioms, and it's really, really funny. I might give you the link so other people can watch it, because it's even just, the difference between Welsh and English in terms of some of those idioms. And the similarity between Welsh and other languages, which English doesn't have, actually is quite interesting.
Languages are a very bizarre thing, especially when you're working in an international organisation. And I refuse to conform to US English, and it's routing, not routing. It's data, not data. I mean, I could continue.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why I tend to use bi-weekly is, again, for our American friends who don't use the word fortnightly. And they just think we're talking about some online game.
Oh my God. Okay. Nice.
Awesome.
Please continue to use the British English. It's easier for me because there's a lot of the French language into the language. So for me, it makes me lazy. I just literally
this one might please David. My pronunciation is going to be completely terrible, but Cymru and Biff.
Again?
Which means Wales forever.
Oh, Cymru and Biff. Yes.
Yes, see, I told you.
I heard the same.
and you would be right. Yes. Anyway, let's crack on. I've taken us off track.
Yes. Excellent. So after all that waffle, if you're still with us after that, then obviously there is something that you're liking about this. So do click the like button, subscribe, follow, rate, whatever the mechanism is for the platform that you're joining us on. And without further ado, I will pass across to David to talk about God mode, which is, less said the better.
Yeah, and I was going to be really quick about this. There's been a few, I think, people talking about it. John Saville has done a really, really good explanation of what it is, and I just wanted to help reinforce some of that. Plus, he did an awesome outtake of himself with a sword pretending to be He-Man for those of an age that might remember it. So please do go look at that outtake and go and look at his article, because it will cover in far more detail than what I'm going to cover here. And I think the point I wanted to make is, when you talk about God mode, it's like you have the power to do anything you want whenever you want it, anywhere, right? And it's an innocuous little slider that's in the Azure portal. So if you're a global admin and you click this little slider, then it then flows down rights all the way down to through the hierarchy, and it's there for purposes like, well, if you've got orphan subscriptions, for example, it will enable you to find those orphan subscriptions and then do something with them. But I think the point I wanted to make is that you could associate that with, is that the same as kind of a break glass thing? Can you use God mode to fix something, somewhere? It's not. I think it's really there from a overarching role that enables you to go deep briefly, come back, fix something or look at something, and then come back and turn it off. So not there as a day-to-day capability, not there to be your first port of call. So everyone listening, please don't do that. That's bad. I'm going to stop there.
I did in the past.
Excellent. So yeah, it's an interesting naming convention for that one. But Cyrus, now I know you want to talk about Intune, and specifically for helping secure Macs, which will be useful because I think at least two of us are probably running on a Mac.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of gaps between what we want today and what is possible. So I will try to not digress. I know we started by digressing a lot, and this triggers my digression loop, so I'll try to be straightforward. Just a context of why I choose this news. There was recently from Microsoft Intune on LinkedIn. They shared two news on macOS. One is an excellent one, a pre-script installation and post-script installation for macOS, which helps to simulate SCCM mode, if you want, for Mac on Intune. And the second news is adding more support for different package on Mac. And parallel to that, there is an excellent tool that was built by a Microsoft MVP called Intune Brew. It's like Homebrew, but for Mac, and it automates the installation of all the applications. So for example, you just type the name of the application you want. It do the version control, so you don't have to check the version anymore. It packages the app automatically in a PowerShell command line. You don't have to know the PowerShell command line because it's a package of scripts, and it simulates what experience we have today, what the administrator today have for Windows. And why it's interesting, it's not just to say Intune is great, is most of the clients we see, they have some Microsoft 365 licenses. And if they have Business Premium or above, they must have Intune, and sometimes they don't even know. A lot of companies are attached to SCCM and the on-premise endpoint management, and that is also a gap we need to bridge for full migration to the cloud. Because we often talked about Active Directory being the bottleneck, legacy systems, etc. But one big friction point is actually the endpoint management. And when you invested like years on experience on tools like SCCM, it's very hard to justify to go to the cloud. And so there's 2 points we use normally to justify the migration. One is you're stuck with legacy system, so it's dangerous, etc. And the second one is what you mentioned just before, Richard, is the comfort. A lot of users, they want to use Mac and they don't want to necessarily rely on systems that are expensive like Jamf or others. So there's all these actors that together move forward this new era of mobile device management. Apple itself, like a year ago, exactly, yes, it was February or March 2024, they announced the new platform SSO and platform SSO, and was an entry point for Intune to say, okay, we will also have the capability to offer a smooth experience for the users to have only one account instead of creating two, as where it's supposed to do. So all this friction slowly being removed and the gap being bridged. I'm sure this year we can see more companies saying we need some experts who can help us completely migrate those endpoint management system. And sorry, I forgot to mention the name of the MVP who developed this Intune Brew, and I re-invite everyone to Google the Intune Brew online. It's called Ogur Kos, and I don't know if I pronounced the name correctly, but thanks to him for working with Microsoft to make us happy admins.
Gotta have happy admins.
I must actually go and speak to one of our colleagues, Adam, who works in our CIO office, to find out actually how we do support Macs within IBM, because I'm almost certain we're not using Intune, so we must be using another tool for that.
We use Jamf.
Yeah, as I say, it wouldn't surprise me at all, and I'd be interested in that because IBM is an odd organisation in that sense. Odd's probably not the right word, but we'll go for it because I reckon probably about 70% of the user base is on Macs. So that does add, I would imagine, some complexity to that device management piece when you've got, quite a big proportion using Macs and other Apple devices, as opposed to the other smaller, corpus that are using the old Lenovo Windows laptops. Yes, and I've had both. So I had both. I made the choice to switch to a Mac because I thought it would help me with the Adobe stuff, so for doing the podcast and everything else. A decision that I'm not entirely happy with, but anyway, we don't want to get into the whole Mac versus PC debate because that is a
that is a rabbit hole.
Yeah, that will give us a whole completely different outlook on this podcast. Anyway, I was going to talk about a couple of data breaches that were announced over the last couple of weeks. So again, apologies because we pre-recorded some of the information that has come out since then. We probably should have covered in those episodes, but anyway, never mind. So there was two that sort of caught my attention. One, and I don't know if anybody else saw this one, it was about the British Museum. And I found this one quite interesting because, again, it relates to pretty much everything that we've been talking about over the last couple of months. In the fact that, according to the BBC, the British Museum had a contract IT worker who they let go. About a week afterwards, he walked back into the museum and messed around with some of their IT systems, shut a load down, did some other stuff apparently. And I was reading this going, hang on a second, he left. You obviously didn't revoke any of his user credentials. I don't know whether they have passes to get into the British Museum and to get into the IT room. You'd hope they would do. So obviously they didn't either take his pass away or he just followed someone in through the building who didn't know he'd been let go or contract ended or whatever it was. And then was able to access systems, obviously using some sort of administrative account where they hadn't changed the credentials, and was allowed to do whatever he wanted to do. And it just strikes me that we really are terrible in general amongst organisations at JML processes, especially the levers part of it. And I know that in some instances, and again, just going back about a year or so ago, I think the default token expiration time on Entra ID was I don't know, it was in the hours. So if you had an emergency that you had to really revoke someone's access right there and then, you couldn't really do it. Now that has been changed with the continuous access piece that they've released and a few other bits that allows you to really actually lock those down. But this just sounds like a complete lapse in sort of general hygiene. And I do wonder how often that type of scenario happens. And it was the British Museum that sort of caught the BBC's attention and pushed this out to, a wider audience, and whether it happens quite consistently across the board. And it's a relatively easy thing to implement within Entra. to do this. It's not
Yeah.
complicated. Yes, I know you have got some on-prem systems that will work in a slightly different way, et cetera, et cetera. But, basic user hygiene would have resolved that. The other one that came up, again, sounds potentially related, and there is a reference here on this article from Bleeping Computer. So I put the link into the notes around the Microsoft hack in March of last year. Now, HPE announced last week that they had suffered a breach. A number of email accounts had been attacked, and a certain amount of personal information had been accessed by, I think it was by Cozy Bear, so our friends behind the SolarWinds attack. And again, what strikes me is that the initial entry point, for want of a better word, was a compromised account.
Mm.
So, and again, it comes back to just simple hygiene on, your access to that. MFA in most cases, and I'm not saying it would have fixed it here, and I'm not saying that HPE don't have MFA. It's not in the article, but MFA covers 99% of compromised email attacks, especially if it's set up with, an authenticator app or a YubiKey or something along those lines to give you that extra level of security, as opposed to just, an SMS message or something like that, because we know that there are ways that you can spoof those or work around sort of basic SMS type second factor authentication. The other thing in that article that struck me was, again, as I said, it linked back to the Microsoft breach that was announced last year. And what I hadn't realized around that breach, and again, I'll put the link into the article here, is that from what the Beeping Computer was saying, is that was a password spray attack against non-production environments. So it sounds like from this article that the actual initial breach occurred on a non-production server, and then they were able to move laterally across the network. And again, I probably shouldn't be too harsh on Microsoft. We are a pro-Microsoft part of et cetera, et cetera. But I know from past experience that it's very easy to set up test systems using your Active Directory, your production Active Directory, or at least if you are using a test dev Active Directory. I've seen it so many instances where there's a two-way trust set up between that and your primary Active Directory, which basically means you might as well be using the production AD.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether this is still the case, so you guys might be able to inform me or not, but certainly a couple of years ago, the recommendation for any Office 365 development was to use your production tenancy, which meant that you were using your production Active Directory again. So even when you were doing test dev work, because of the way that you can't guarantee that your O365 tenant is the same build as a test tenant, et cetera, the recommendation was always do things within the production tenancy. Yeah, but that also leaves the fact that you're then using production identities to do test work or dev work. And if you don't have the controls in place, then you'll always run that extra risk that if you get a compromised account that is on a test environment, that then it can be used on the production environment. So I found it very interesting that happened. And I say I've seen that firsthand about 10 years ago. And since then, I've always been, okay, hang on a second. If we're doing development and we need to have some sort of AD system behind that, that has to be a separate one. Yes, there is some work to do around moving accounts around and making sure accounts are, have the right permissions when you move it into production, all that sort of malarkey. But it's so much safer to have that completely isolated from your production environments. Anyway, enough of my ranting.
It's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because some of the con to that is you don't inherit all the, dare we say, the overbearing security in some instances that the production instance has. So you're almost leaving creds in code or in things is just bad form anyway. It doesn't matter where you do it, isn't it? But in theory, the protections you inherit should help mitigate some of that, because if MFA is turned on for everyone, right, in your production tenant, whilst there may be creds there, you won't be able to do anything with it. But to your point, the test environments don't always have, dare I say, the same degree of rigor.
Yeah, but then you sort of go through in theory, and again, I'm going back to actually when this happened, so I can't go into too much details, but we ended up having like a review of the solution, and all sort of technicalities apart. One of the recommendations that we ended up facing was actually about 6 different environments, going from like a normal sort of dev environment to an integration environment to a test environment, and then to a UAT environment, a pre-prod, production, fix on fail. So like a sort of a backup environment that you can sort of roll back into and come off there. And it was only until we got to basically the pre-production environment that we actually moved into the production Active Directory. Everything up until then was still set within this sort of isolated development environment. And this was for a critical national infrastructure organization, et cetera, et cetera. So there were some extra controls and concerns around that. And yes, there is overhead. It is a pain. There's a lot of additional admin and a lot of additional sort of architectural considerations, licenses, etc. Although obviously Microsoft does help with that with the dev test subscriptions on Azure, so you can get away with some of the cost of that, and MSDN for individual users, etc., etc. But yes, it is a pain. But you can see in so many other, this isn't an isolated incident. I've seen this so many times where people are just using this, and it just opens up such a big hole because again, you don't want to have the same friction when you're doing development to say, okay, I need to, as you said, I need to MFA. I need to, I need to go and request, some other PIM or PAM process because I need to do X, Y, and Z for this particular instance. But in the long term, it's so much safer to do it this way around. That I think
that's a good segue to a topic we should probably do another day, which is security as an enabler, not an inhibitor.
Yes. And that is
I love that.
My motto these days is that actually that security should be there to enable everything, not to sit down and go, 100%. Oh my God, we need to go through cybersecurity. They're going to block everything. It's going to be months.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway,
it's a shift left mindset. But for the news about the museum, that's an example of God mode. And we have plenty of these little gods.
I thought that actually your 2 topics were actually quite good because in a sense, if you're using Intune, for example, you can say, hey, that device is no longer part of our
immediately,
therefore it can't be used. Again, if it's a contract, they're probably using their own device by default. Whether they were doing that in this instance, I don't know.
You can use Intune to configure Windows 365, which is also very safe for the partners and all these people because you don't have to give them a device. It's expensive and it's old school. Still, they have access with any device, and you can block quickly or you can restrict the access. But for the museum, on the second example you used, how do you implement the super God mode to supervise those little gods everywhere in the company? I mean, you talk about governance. There's also RM, insider risk management. So when you can predict it, the behavior of someone that is disgruntled or is going to come back and mess all the systems.
Yeah, I mean, those sort of insider risk pieces are really, really important. And before I moved into my newish role, that was one of the areas that I was working for. For another organisation, and the consideration they had, and again, I can't mention names or anything, but it was really interesting for the organisation that they were so focused on all data exfiltration, sort of DLP activities. How do we manage leavers when they leave? Which was very odd considering, like I say, I can't go into too much detail, but they weren't like a defence organisation or, a government organisation. This was just a standard, distribution CPG account, as we would call them. And
excellent.
It's like so secure on that. And yet at the time, Office 365 or M365 wasn't quite in that position to say, okay, right, that guy's left, kill that account immediately and don't allow them to have access. So we had all sorts of weird processes running around in parallel to try and mitigate that sort of component.
I was going to say we're going off on a tangent, but the distribution CPG sector, right? They tend to be the first. The attacks will happen a lot there. There was a recent one, wasn't there? That was targeted supply chain, right? And supply chain is a really common vector. So I in some ways I understand their that mindset, right? Because they can be hit first before the organizations that they're supplying will get hit, right? To see if there's an in there. And there was a recent breach. Was it last year? I can't remember. I'll have to look up.
Yeah.
That did exactly that.
Wow, I didn't know that, because supply chain is also some industry I know really well. I didn't know that was one of the first. But that's for next time. It's really interesting what David said, that we have to talk about the security as an enabler. That is very important, because stress marketing doesn't work anymore. Like if they don't care about security, they will not ever listen.
And it's a frustration for me. And again, this is probably a topic for another day. But as David, you know, and I think Cyrus, you do as well. Now, I started off as a developer. Then I moved in sort of consultancy around SharePoint, Office 365, architecture with Azure, etc. And it's only relatively recently that I've been in the cybersecurity world. So I don't claim to be an expert in any structure of this area. It's something I'm learning as we go along. And again, because it's not an architectural role, that's fine, I think, because I'm more working with the alliance part of the business, so less technical.
Yeah, I found the article as well, so we'll post it.
This whole shift left stuff is really interesting for me, because again, when I started doing development, I did some development for the BBC, website development for the BBC, for example. Weirdly, security was never really a focus. You know, you had to write nice code, and the code had to be compliant and functional, etc. But there was never really any onus on the development team to think about security. That got handed off to somebody else. So you basically put it into UAT and then walked away from it, and then somebody else went and did the rest of the work. And it was almost like a black box.
True.
And that's changing, but I don't think it's changing fast enough or effectively enough for it to actually have an issue. I mean, we read about breaches on a daily basis. Okay, most of them do appear to be user related, but say to be. Right, complete tangent off that now. So David, I know you had another 2 topics that you wanted to briefly cover, and I think Cyrus, you had another one as well. So I will shush, and David, you can tell us about Data Formulator.
Yeah, let me quickly whiz through these 2. So Data Formulator is a new open source Microsoft project that's designed to automate and streamline how data gets cleaned, reshaped, or even generated from scratch. Beauty is it offers a set of templates, call them recipes, I suppose, for different data transformation scenarios. That reduces the amount of manual work needed to get data sets into usable form. And obviously data is just growing and growing and growing. So anything that you can do to sort of shortcut that is of massive help to the people doing those things. And, takes an automation first approach. So it cuts down on this was a new phrase to me, something called routine wrangling. Have you heard that? I haven't heard that before. No, but it means all the fiddly, repetitive chore of cleaning, formatting, and merging data before you can actually do any analysis on it. So I learned a new thing today, so that was quite good. And it, as I said, it's got these templates, so it's these flexible building blocks, and you can mix and match different transformation recipes to sort of handle everything, I think, from file cleanups to more complex data pipelines. So I think the takeaway for me was, it could help remove the drudge work of sort of constant data prep. And, as with all things AI, it sort of then frees up time for sort of deeper insights and faster experimentation, which is obviously where the value actually comes. So that was the first one. And my second one was something that made some of the newspapers in the UK here today, and it was a Microsoft research white paper, my favorite go-to source, as I keep saying, of research, and it was called The Impact of Generative AI on Critical Thinking, and it was self-reported reductions in cognitive effort and confidence efforts from a survey of knowledge workers. And essentially this survey was across like 320 people to see how using generative AI shapes their critical thinking skills. And that was based on Bloom's taxonomy, the knowledge analysis and evaluation. So, and it was seen that obviously whilst AI can save time and reduce sort of cognitive load in specific areas, it also shifts work towards verifying and integrating AI outputs than creating everything from scratch. And that's quite an interesting, we kind of see this happening. And I think when I look back at my career, I used to be well known for being able to find information. Like there used to be TechNet, right? The CDs that had the Microsoft knowledge bases on. And I was really, really good at finding that information and then being able to pull that out and do something with it. What's happening now is that critical thinking, the way that you have to understand what am I trying to do? What's the outcome going to be? How am I going to go about it? Let's execute and then refine. Well, that's gone, isn't it? Because you just go to an AI and say, tell me about this. And it just gives you all the information. You don't go through that same process anymore, I don't think. And it then becomes, how do I validate that what it's giving me is correct? And I think, people who are trusting the AI too much won't question it. So if they trust it, obviously they're not going to question what they get back. And Cyrus and I have spoken about this in the past in terms of asking fairly complex questions, and it comes back really, really confidently with an answer, and then you dig into it a bit and it's actually completely wrong. But that creates blind spots, right? And then conversely, those that are really confident in their own abilities will then often vet and refine their AI outputs. You've got two different groups of people, and it's almost the wrong way around.
Yeah.
So we need to, I think we need to have some way of that rebalancing that effect, right? And critical thinking shouldn't go away, but we need to understand what that looks like in a AI first world.
Did any? And again, this is sort of more American news, even though it was reported in the on the BBC. Did anybody see the Super Bowl advert kerfuffle around Google Gemini?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so again, our American viewers, listeners, whatever, will probably have a go at me about this. But obviously, Super Bowl weekend was last weekend. So congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles and commiseration to the Kansas City Chiefs, who didn't get their three-peat. But the halftime adverts or the breaks in the Super Bowl adverts are obviously really, really, really important for American, organizations. And for the viewers, apparently it's a big thing from the sort of cultural aspect as well. I'm doing this from memory, so I'm probably going to get the details wrong. But basically, Google Gemini had an advert that planned for there, and part of the advert was talking to some sort of cheesemonger or something about what to do with their business. And the stat came up that Gouda was the world's most popular cheese, and so this person should do something with Gouda. And some eagle-eyed viewer, either in a preview or whatever, spotted that actually that was incorrect. And Gouda is not the world's most popular cheese by 67% of consumption or whatever the figure was. Again, this is from memory, so don't quote me, and I will get the article and put it out there. But Google came back and they changed the advert, and they removed that piece from the advert before it ran on Super Bowl Sunday. But the response from whoever the Google head or the spokesman from Google was, this wasn't a hallucination. The internet was wrong. Because obviously what they've done is they've gone through the internet and they'd found, I don't know, X number of references that said that Gouda is the most popular cheese in the world. And they ran with it. So again, it basically coming back to there that actually, especially if you're doing this in a Super Bowl advert, why don't you look at it and go, hang on a second, I really should check that out and make sure that it's an accurate stat. Apparently, cheddar is the most popular cheese in the world, but so hooray for English cheese. But again, who knows? That might be a Reddit fact or something as well. So we have to take that with a big pinch of salt. Cyrus, did you have one more topic before we call it a day today?
You know what's funny? I put my news on the mixer and it was mixed with my topic. So I already mixed my topic on my news. No, I don't have for this time. But David's news about critical thinking, I think it should be like highlighted. It's of public use. We had the experience together with this kind of subject, and I see around me more and more people using the AI and just trusting whatever it says because of the tone, and that's also concerning me as a manipulative behavior. Because if you speak like the AI in a really confident way, people can trust you, and it's a subject I like, a mix of technology and cognitive science, psychology. I just love that. So
I'm not sure if I should be
scary news.
Yeah, so I'm not sure I should be advertising other people's podcasts here, but I do listen to the Verge cast podcast, and the host there, a chap called Nilay Patel, just says that the generative AI lie to you, but they lie to you confidently, and you use that word. So people look at it and go, "Oh, that must be true," because it's come back. It's so, either very quickly or the structure of the answer is very sort of compelling. And
can I be really controversial here, though, Richard?
Yeah.
Well, people have been doing that for millennia.
Yeah.
If you look confident enough and sound confident enough, somebody will believe them.
Well, what is it?
It's
What's the phrase that came up? I think Branson, Richard Branson popularized this, which was "fake it until you make it." So just be confident, talk confidently, act confidently until you actually learn what it is that you're talking about.
It's worse than that. It's using a confirmation bias. So when you come with a subject, when you type and you say some stuff, it implies that you're interested by this news, and it will confirm, say, yes, of course, it's possible. You can use Intune for free. And then, oh, it's super cool. And you go to your board, and then you get a cold sweat. So
another BBC article, actually, from a couple of days ago, I don't know who else caught this one, but there's a legal firm in the UK that has now banned all generative AI because they did a like an internal research study, whatever, analysis. Again, I'm talking off the top of my head here, but it's like 70% of the law firm staff were using generative AI tools. And I was going, oh, that's a bit worrying. Because I don't know who remembers, but there's a story about a year ago where a lawyer in the US had basically, I don't know why he'd done it, that's run out of time or something like that, but he asked ChatGPT to write a brief or a submission or whatever it is that you have in legal terms. And it had like case references for past, theses, like, X versus X, the outcome was da-da-da. He submitted it to the judge. The judge went, what is this rubbish? And basically handed it back and said, look, go and do your work properly because none of these cases exist. Your case history here is just completely made up. And apparently ChatGPT had just gone, Again, if I find that, I'll post the link into the article. But it's...
But what they're using it for, right, are things that organizations should be bringing on board, right? It's document summarization. It's based on my own data set. What would I write? All those things should be common use cases. And just saying a flat no, there's quite a bit of debate about that one going on. I've seen similar threads on that exact thing, and people are saying, well, you should be embracing it and we're working out how you can use it rather than flat no, because that's shadow IT, right? And shadow IT is driven by needs, and if those needs aren't met, people will always find another way of.
It's out there, and it's not necessarily that you can go to chat.com and you can say, okay, right, we're going to block that domain, or we're going to block a certain secret domain. So I don't know whether you can go down and look at the protocol or the type of messaging potentially to block it. But yeah, you're right. It's shadow IT, and I think they're trying to coin a new firm saying shadow AI or something like that. But it's something that we need to think about. Yeah. Anyway,
or put another way, unmet customer needs. Right?
Yes. We need to do well on customer experience or client experience as well, because that's an interesting topic that I think that we went through a whole phase years ago of really focusing on sort of UX and user experience and everything else. And I don't know whether it's just because I've just stepped away from that world, but that doesn't seem to have the same prominence as it used to. But anyway, that's certainly a topic for another day.
100%.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for listening or watching, depending on how you're accessing this. It's I'm going to sound like the two runners now, and it's a good day from me.
It's a goodbye from you.
Bye-bye.
Right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.